There's a thought experiment currently doing the rounds online, entitled The Alien Invasion. One of my friends actually tagged me in an article on this. Unfortunately, I can't find the article, which took the position that if a superior alien race were to invade our planet and see how we behave, particularly the way that we behave in respect to animals, where we kind of exploit them and use them as resources, they would look at us and go, "Oh, what a bunch of savages," and follow our example and start farming us for their own pleasure and benefit. So this particular article that my friend tagged me in, took the position that if that were to happen, we better change our ways so as to absolve ourselves from any guilt or have that happening to us. Whether a superior alien race were to invade us or not, I don't think it's going to make much difference whether we're vegan or not. If they're going to enslave us and going to use us for resources, they'd probably do it regardless. Unless they are capable of sort of higher emotional reasoning and being able to distinguish between wrong and right, I don't think it will make a difference. If they are able to distinguish between wrong and right, then they probably wouldn't do it anyway, because it would be wrong to enslave a sentient race of beings just because they have the capacity to suffer. It would be wrong, wouldn't it? I mean, that's my position. Maybe some people would disagree that it wouldn't be wrong. It's kind of like, I mean, I read some comments on the subject that said only if they are able to determine right and wrong are we able to morally judge them. It would be, us saying whether it's right or wrong is basically saying, is it wrong for a virus to invade our body? I mean, it's not up to the virus to decide what's wrong and right. It just does what it does. So we would have to assume that this alien race is capable of rational, emotional judgment and being able to determine the difference between right and wrong. Now, that brings me to the argument, are humans capable of determining right and wrong? I personally feel that as a human, I am able to determine right and wrong. Looking at the way most humans behave, I'm not sure whether I can speak for the rest of the species. I think many of us are able to determine right and wrong, but I think a lot of other people are just capable of looking for facts that support their position, depending on whether or not they want to believe something. That's just the way I see it. Now, I wasn't able to find this particular article, but I did stumble upon another article which was written by Reese Southern. So, Why an Alien Invasion is No Argument for Animal Rights. You can read this on philosophynow.org. Reese Southern is a freelance writer and philosophy student. Now, that is quite evident to me after reading this article, because clearly he has a lot more to learn. I'm not being rude, I'm just stating the facts. He has a lot more to learn. So yeah, I'll put a link to the article so you can go and take a look. But let's just have a look here. He presents kind of the position of veganism and kind of the ideology quite well. And kind of talks about human privilege and human domination. But the first statement that he made, which I took exception to, but cows, pigs, lambs, and chickens raised on farms and killed in slaughterhouses do not suffer the same horror and existential crisis as humans would in the same circumstances. Now, do we really know that? Do we really know that they don't? I actually wanted to find out if there were any scientific studies on this, because obviously you can't say that anything is true unless science has proven it. That took me to National Geographic, looking at whether animals get depressed or not. The thing is, now, we can't even diagnose depression in humans without actually getting testimonial from the human in question and asking them about the symptoms that they're suffering. So until we find a way to communicate with animals, There are people who can communicate with animals, but some people are skeptical of that. But yeah, until we find a way where we can communicate with animals, we don't know whether they become depressed or not. But we know about the symptoms of depression. So things like becoming withdrawn, not socially interacting with members of their own species, reduction in appetite. All of these behaviors are witnessed in animals in certain situations, such as the loss of a family member or a friend. I mean, how many of you have had pets, more than one pet, where one of them dies and the other one won't eat anymore? We already know that animals suffer from grief. Mother cows, when they have their calves torn away from them in the dairy industry, will cry sometimes for days on end. We know that they suffer grief. So to say that they don't suffer the same horror and existential crisis is, I really don't know where he's getting his information from, because we just don't know that. And evidence would suggest that actually they do suffer. He has done well to point out that they suffer to some degree and they want to live just like us. So fair play to him. He does sometimes speak the truth. Now, he's gone on to say that just being vegan is not going to be enough to save us from an alien invasion, because there are other problems with human civilization, which I agree with. There are. But just because veganism doesn't solve every single problem, does that mean that it's not a worthy ideology? I mean, this is the problem that I have with a lot of people who have a problem with me being vegan. I mean, I hear this a lot, and sort of arguments along this vein. I'm sure some of you have heard similar sorts of things. Oh, you're vegan, but look, you're using this MacBook. That's made by slave labor in China, so you're a hypocrite. Does that mean that it's justifiable to senselessly kill animals when we don't need to? Just because I engage in this one behavior means that I should engage in every single behavior that's wrong? That's like saying it's okay for me to kill this puppy because you might step on an ant. I can hear you saying, oh, you're comparing Chinese factory workers to ants. I'm not comparing Chinese workers to ants. I'm comparing one bullshit argument to another bullshit argument. So let's just understand the difference. So what else does he say? Universal veganism wouldn't stop the road building, logging, urban and suburban development, pollution, resource consumption, and other forms of land transformation that kills animals by the billions. I'm not sure that he really understands how much impact veganism actually has. Pollution, let's remember that the animal agriculture industry is one of the biggest causes of climate change in the world, more than even the transportation industry. I'll put a link to a really, really good talk in the description box where people can find out some more about that if they don't believe me. Resource consumption. Cattle farming uses up 100,000 litres of water per kilogram. When you compare that to 500 litres per kilogram of potatoes, to say that veganism is not going to have any impact on resource consumption, dude, you need to look at the facts. Yeah, it can't do everything, but that's not the fault of veganism. Just because that's like saying, I don't want to support the fight against FGM, female genital mutilation, because it doesn't do enough to address rape. I mean, that's the argument that he's making. So it's not an argument. Now, he's then gone on to talk about there is no limit to the amount of food vegan aliens could steal from us, because there is no vegan ceiling on foraging. Just as vegan humans can take all the plant matter they want from the world, no matter how many animals starve as a consequence. Yeah, this is pretty much the argument that it's not really an argument. It's more of a joke. If vegans love animals so much, then why are they eating all their food? Let's not forget about all the food that is actually fed to the animals that meat eaters consume. Most of the world's plant crops are fed to livestock to then feed humans. So if we didn't have the livestock, if we didn't breed the livestock, they wouldn't exist. There would be much, much less animals that would eat much, much less food than is already being fed to them, and then the vegans would eat what was left. So this is not an argument. Okay? Are people understanding this? I understand it's quite a difficult one to get your head around. Most of the plant crops that you say that we are eating are actually indirectly being eaten by you, because they're being eaten by the animals that you eat. Got it? Okay, let's move on. A vegan alien invasion could all but destroy humanity while rationalizing most of our suffering and death as accidental or unfortunate but necessary, just as many vegans now rationalize the harms our plant-based civilization causes non-human animals. He's referring here to, all the animals that get killed inadvertently by the plant agriculture industry. So snakes, dormice, animals like that. And, I have seen people share these articles as an argument in defense of eating meat. Well, if vegans care so much about animals, what about all the animals that they're inadvertently killing by eating crops? Again, back to my earlier point, this isn't an argument, because if you're eating livestock, you're actually killing even more of those animals inadvertently, because you're not just eating the animals that you are directly eating, you're also causing the death of all those other animals that are killed by the crop agriculture industry. Now, saying that vegans should be able to save every single animal in the world is just, it's ridiculous. Like, we do what we can and we're doing more than you. So saying that we're not doing enough and that means that you should keep killing the animals that you're killing because you can't stop to kill everyone, it's not an argument. Sorry, but it's not an argument. Okay, what else is he saying? Correcting the species power imbalance that vegans decry would require much more than humans giving up animal products. We would have to stop spaying and neutering animals, reverse our destruction and fragmentation of animal habitat, give up mass agriculture and civilization, and become pacifist gatherers who somehow never forage food that other animals need. Even then, other animals would have nothing to gain from our presence here. This is why some people believe that the logical conclusion of the animal rights movement is human extinction. Now, I agree with him on a lot of points here. There are a lot of problems with our current human civilization that would need changing, and veganism is just a small part of it. Just because veganism doesn't deal with every single aspect of the problems of our civilization doesn't mean it isn't a worthy cause. In fact, it is one of the most worthy causes that there is in dealing with our impact on the planet. I think you will find that most vegans will support other causes as well. Blaming vegans for not solving every single problem on the planet is a total red herring, and it completely absolves yourself from any responsibility of changing any of your behavior and puts everything on us. But the thing is, probably we are going to be the ones who are going to have to shift this entire dynamic of human superiority and destruction of the planet. Not because the vegans are better than anyone else, but probably because veganism is so impactful that when people actually do start to shift their thinking and think, hey, we're kind of fucking up the planet here, we should probably do something about this, they realize that veganism is hugely impactful and they actually start to become vegan, so then they become one of us. Now, I wasn't always vegan, but I was always quite passionate about making a positive impact rather and minimizing my negative impact. That's why I'm now vegan. And that's why a lot of people who I am friends with and who I have come into contact with who are also quite passionate about these things are generally the people who are much, much more open-minded about veganism. And when I talk to them about veganism, they all tell me that, yeah, this is actually a really great movement, and you're right, and I actually want to go vegan as well myself. It's only the people that don't give a fuck about what's happening with the planet that are resistant towards veganism. That's just my experience. I could be wrong, but that's what I've observed. Now, I want to present a slightly different idea to the standard alien invasion argument now and see what you think of this, guys. Suppose it's not an alien invasion. Suppose it is actually completely analogous to the farming industry, in that we created these animals, we bred them for our use, and we've essentially genetically modified them and engineered them. We've created cows that produce more milk than their ancestors would have. Same with sheep, chickens. I mean, most of the chickens that we've genetically engineered are actually baby chickens by the time they go to slaughter. They look like adult chickens, but because of the way that we've genetically engineered them, they grow super, super fast to the point where we can slaughter them when they're still babies. So let's just create an analogy that is more in keeping with this idea. Let's suppose that instead of being invaded, we were actually created by aliens. So, we all know that, like, we share 98% of our DNA with primates, that 2% comes from the missing link. We don't know what that is. Let's suppose this 2% was actually genetic material from other alien races from different parts of the universe. And aliens were like, hey, let's take these primates, but let's make them a little bit more like us so that we can create a kind of species that is smart enough for us to enslave and use as, let's say, some kind of slave race that they want for, to do their work or whatever, but is not smart enough to realize that they have been created and genetically modified by us. So we can basically engineer them into these little drones, and we can farm them for, I don't know, like, maybe it's our emotions that they feed off, something like that. Like, maybe they feed off our fear or something. So we'll create this system, like they enslave us through, like, the monetary system or something, by creating this monetary system that keeps on growing exponentially through, like, interest and inflation, and keep them working all the time, so that they think that they're working for these resources, but the money isn't tied to any resources. Like, we'll just get rid of that. It will just be money that just keeps on getting more and more. So they have to work harder and harder and harder to make the same amount of money to buy these resources. There's actually enough resources for all of them, and they wouldn't actually normally have to work, but they're not smart enough to figure that one out. They think that they have to work for a living. So everybody's, like, enslaved. And the slavery gets worse and worse and worse, and people have to work harder and harder all the time. If we realized that we were the creation of an alien race and that we had been enslaved, do you think we would be able to break out of that? To break out of our enslavement? Like when people say, oh, if everyone went vegan, the animals wouldn't exist anymore and they'd just roam free, but they wouldn't be able to really survive because they're domesticated. Like, are we too domesticated to actually thrive as earthlings on this planet and be free and actually just enjoy the resources that are already here without having to work for them? Because if you think about it, we're actually, apart from the animals that we created and enslaved, the animals that are actually thriving and living in their natural habitat, they don't work for their resources. They forage or hunt, some of them, the ones that are supposed to, the rest of them forage. They don't farm. Like, I mean, we could farm, but we could also forage. But do you think we'd even be capable of that? Do you think we'd even be capable of thriving on this planet and surviving without having to work? We're the only species that has to work, that has to have some kind of job in order to survive, to get money in order to survive. I mean, why do we actually need money? Is it actually for the resources, or is it just to pay debt? I mean, personally, when he talks about the ultimate goal of the animal activists is actually human extinction. I can't speak for everybody, but I actually don't think that would be such a bad idea, because I'm not sure that we could thrive. I don't know that most people could. Maybe some people could. There are a lot of people in the vegan community who actually don't want children. Now, it's not part of the vegan ideology, because it's not a religion. This is what a lot of people fail to understand. It's not a whole ideology for living your life by. It's just one aspect of it. And then every vegan can decide how they feel about other things. Some vegans believe in marriage, some don't. Some want kids, some don't. I personally don't want my own biological kids. If it happens, great, but I'm not planning it. I would rather adopt. A lot of vegans agree with me on this, because we are quite conscious of what's happening on the planet, and we don't want to add to the problems of the planet. We would rather help than cause a hindrance. And most of us are not really selfish. So that being said, maybe if everybody converted to veganism and everybody started being more conscious of this, and a lot of people did adopt the ideology that they don't actually want children, then maybe everybody would just have a happy vegan life and then just die peacefully in their beds after a long life, because we know vegans are quite safe from a lot of degenerative diseases. And then there just wouldn't be any children. Then humans would just peacefully die out and let the planet actually heal from the destruction that we've caused it, because nature will always take over. It's not the planet that's in trouble. I mean, unless we kind of blow each other up with some of these nuclear weapons that we've got stashed away, but that's a different issue. Just dealing with the problem of kind of human overpopulation, overconsumption, infinite growth. If humans died out, nature would take over. The planet will be fine. It's us that needs saving, and I'm not sure it's worth it. I don't know. What do you guys think?